Alright, today we're going to be talking about human impact on the environment, and this directly relates to what we're learning about in ecology. And mostly what we're going to be talking about is what do humans do, what is our impact, can they be trusted, focusing on things like climate change and other issues that might be relevant. So first I'm going to start off with some things that humans can do. So mostly we sort these into things that are bad things and good things. And they tend to be pretty balanced. In terms of bad things, we can overhunt species, destroying food webs. We can destroy habitats, destroying biomes. And use of pesticides, which can cause bioaccumulation or an increase of certain things in the ecosystem that are not good. Mostly this has to do with ecosystem disruption. In terms of good things, we can use technology. This happens a lot with species that are rare and trying to keep them and maintain them. We can help with biodiversity by maintaining species and enforce legislature, such as things like with the bald eagle, and change actions that we're doing that are currently bad to keep animals healthy. Things that we should be concerned about include things like extinction. Extinction is when there is no longer a species alive. Habitat destruction. So you might have heard as a little kid about rainforest destruction and the lack of biodiversity, which not only affects us, but also affects things like the search for medicine. So what's some of the historical context for climate change? Currently, there's a lot of naysayers, or people who say that humans are not affecting it. This affects a lot of policy because the idea is if you don't think that climate change is an issue, you don't reenact policy. Another thing to note is that some people believe that the rest of us are idiots. So, for example, Senator James Inhofe doesn't believe in the idea of evidence. So climate change does not mean that the world is warming up, so that means there will be no more snow. He's pulling on this misconception that, oh, it's warm, therefore you shouldn't be able to find snow. That's a total lie, and is just pulling on, people who aren't thinking critically. It may be getting warmer in some places, but then that means it's cooling in others. The fact that we're in a drought, that rain is not happening in some places, that there is extreme flooding and hurricanes in others, is more evidence that there is climate change going on. So what's going on? Climate change is a real phenomenon, regardless of what you think. The data shows that, and even though it's been parodied, for example, in Futurama, the idea that if you just drop a giant ice cube in the ocean, then it could solve it, as well as been parodied or noticed by John Oliver, humans do need to take action on climate change. It is a big issue that needs to be considered. So what is the data for it? We can look at things like temperature, we can look at carbon dioxide core samples, we can look at a lot of things that show that humans are making a very large difference in a very short amount of time. You could also consider this in biogeochemical cycles with regards to carbon emissions. Definitely weather has changed. We can look at floods, windstorms, droughts, and slides. They've definitely been on the increase, especially recently. So what does climate change cause? It causes kind of a huge tidal wave of other things. So just because the temperature is increasing by maybe a few degrees, that's causing all kinds of other problems. Certain species, such as algae and producers, aren't able to live. This is creating melting of the ice caps, creating more free water. So there's talk of places that are by the beach are not going to be flooded. And this is causing all kinds of changes in abiotic factors. You might have heard of things like the drowning of the polar bears. That's something else that's to be considered. So really, we need to think about solutions, and that's kind of what these next couple weeks have been about. The idea that we need to take action, get educated about what's causing it, and how we can fix it. And that's just climate change, which is kind of the tip of the iceberg. There are other issues, such as feminization of frogs. So there is an issue going on with Professor Tyrone Hayes at UC Berkeley that there are increased hormones in the water and certain pesticides that are causing male frogs to become female. So what happens when your population shifts to all females? You get population crashes. So instead of having enough males, you're having females. And this is a problem because, it's going to cause extinction of the frogs. And this is also creating infertility in other species, such as humans. Habitat destruction is also causing loss of species, and some of the solutions we're coming up with are things like John Oliver's talked about, the salmon cannon, or species bridges, and these allow animals to kind of get from hot spot to hot spot, so they call locations where organisms can live. And that's, again, a big issue, because if you don't have a place to live, you're not going to have babies. The other issue is the lack of genetic diversity. This is really common in cheetahs, that the less animals there are, the less diversity there is within the species. So you tend to inbreed or not have a lot of kids or children, meaning that you have to mate with your brother or sister in order to keep the species going. And this is kind of an issue that happens with small populations. This is kind of a bottleneck effect. Another issue related to that is loss of keystone species. The reason why they're called keystone species is because in architecture, keystone's kind of what keeps an archway up. And these tend to be problems because if a species is lost, the entire ecosystem changes. So these tend to be guys who keep producers in check or can physically change the ecosystem. For example, elephants keep savannas and grasslands the way they are by knocking down trees. Beavers can build dams, creating kind of a lake or pond sanctuary. The sea otter is really famous for keeping coral kelp forests in place because they eat sea urchins. If they weren't around to eat the sea urchins, then the sea urchins would eat all the kelp, not creating these beautiful kelp forests that we see in Monterey. Other issues you might think about include things like the Pacific trash patch, oil and air pollution, and this is basically poisoning the lands and areas that these things live in. So, for example, oil can really harm animals by making it so they can't keep themselves warm. They're basically covered in toxins. If you've ever been covered in oil, you realize how hard it is to get off. And with issues like tanker spills, these are a huge issue because the whole area becomes polluted and it all needs to be clean, and it kills off and starves algae. So if your producers are dead, basically everything else is a problem from there. So in summary of human impact, we really can make a big difference. There's all these things that we can do, but we need to kind of take action to fix these issues. And so that kind of brings to the what will you do about this? You're the one who has water usage, electricity usage, who's going to be voting for people. So you need to be an educated citizen and not just say, oh, look, there's a snowball. Like, don't be the snowball kid. You got to do something about it. And that's all this human impact is about, taking everything you know and finding out what is your role in space and time. And right now, it is your time in your space to make a difference. Thanks. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call or shoot me a text. Of course, human impact is all over the internet, so feel free to do your own research and digging because there's really a ton out there, and this is just a smidgen of a tip of what's out there in terms of what humans are doing to the environment. So I hope you have a good one. Take care. Have a nice night.